Welcome to Believing the Word with author and pastor Dan Shunk. This program is a ministry of Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Here's what's coming up in today's message.
This is wordy now. We're getting wordy because we're intentionally repeating the same thing over and over. So now even the second generation, all those that came out of Egypt, they've already died and gone on, except for Moses and Caleb, Joshua, and that's about it. And now this is the second generation. God gives them the same opportunity. Follow my word. It will lead you to me. It will make you like me. And yet, they're in the same rebellion.
Israel's story is laid bare, from failed leadership and wasted potential to a long history of rebellion against God's grace. Yet even in judgment, God reveals his deeper purpose, not destruction, but restoration. He reminds his people that he acted for his name's sake, preserving them despite their wandering hearts. This passage calls us to a fresh start, renewed hope rooted in God's faithfulness, a deeper hunger for his ways over our own, and a transformed heart that turns from rebellion to obedience. The same God who confronted Israel's past offers us a new beginning today, inviting us to leave behind what was and step into what he is ready to restore. Now here's Pastor Dan in the book of Ezekiel as he continues his message, A Fresh Start for Hope, Hunger, and Heart.
Then he said, here's your problem. You continue to lust after these other gods and these other idols and these other pursuits, and they're never going to satisfy you, and that's adultery against me. And here they come again, just a few months later, saying, hey, Ezekiel, I just thought we'd check in with you. What's the good word? And God tells them that is offensive. I mean, guys, imagine you're out cheating on your wife, and then one night you just come home and say, hey, I just thought we could, be together tonight and go out on a date. Your wife that you've been cheating on should say, no, let's make this right first. Let's fix this. Let's talk about this. And then maybe we could go out on a date, right? It's inappropriate to come to God and ask for something while you've been cheating on him. And that's what they do here, even a second time. And so don't wonder why God is so offended in verse 3 when he says, will you come and inquire of me? I don't think so. That's offense. God is offended in this. And so let's continue now here in verse 5. He's going to lay out to them this pattern that they refuse to break out of generation after generation. In verse 5 it begins. And this is what God says to Ezekiel to say unto them. Thus says Lord Yahweh, on the day when I chose Israel and swore to the seed of the house of Jacob and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, when I swore to them saying, I am Yahweh your God. Now what's he referring to? Let's get the picture here. He's referring to the days of Moses, when he first sent Moses to deliver them out of Egypt. God's going way back in their history, and he's saying, listen, let me tell you about when Moses first came to you to deliver you. And he continues here, and he says in verse 6, on that day I swore to them to bring them out from the land of Egypt into a land that I had selected for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all the lands. And in verse 7, I said to them, cast away each one of you the detestable things of his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. And so here the first piece of evidence that God presents is that when Israel was first called by God in the days of Moses, it was a twofold call, right? When you got married, if you're married, okay, it was a twofold commitment, wasn't it? Think about it. You committed, I am yours for the rest of my life. And what did you also commit? I am not with anyone else for the rest of my life. That both happened at the exact same moment, right? And that was God's call to them, right? He says, get rid of the detestable things before your eyes, these idols of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. See, a commitment to God says, I'm committed to you, and I will not be with that. It goes together. It would never work in a marriage to just say, well, I just want half of that. I want to be married to you, but I still want that life too. Isn't that gross? Right? And yet that's what we try to do spiritually. We try to do that spiritually. We try to be like, oh, God is cool. Jesus, I go to church. And then what? 3 days later, we're out doing perverse things, cheating on God. And that was the call. So God starts off by saying, look, in the beginning, this was my call to you. Come be bonded to me. Come apart from those things and join me. It was a call to follow God into the promised land and also out of Egypt. Both. That was the call. And that is the same thing for us today. Verse 8, but they rebelled against me, and they were not willing to listen to me. Each one did not cast away the detestable thing of their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Then I said, I will pour out my wrath on them, to spend my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations among whom they lived, in whose sight I made myself known to them by bringing them out of the land of Egypt. So the idea here is that while they were still in Egypt, Israel, though willing to follow God, they did not want to give up their idols. And God's saying that was an utterly detestable thing. So Israel they wanted to experience, this is a good way to put it. Maybe this applies to us. They wanted to experience the love of God, but they didn't have the fear of God, right? Oh, let's add Jesus because he loves me. But they didn't have enough fear of God to say, I don't want to commit adultery against God, spiritually speaking. I need to give these things up. I'm committed to him now. And so I think there's still too much of that in the world today. In the Christian church today, there's a lot of love for God, but not a reverence for him, not a respect for him that we should have. And that's the idea here that's being portrayed. So God's presenting here in verse 8 and 9 that he's going to purge them. He's going to purify them as he brings them out of Egypt. Not because of their own goodness, though, but because of his namesake. You see, that's a key distinction. It was as it was for them, so it is for us. God's promised to bring you, if you're a believer today, God has promised to bring you into eternal life now. He's set that seal, that promise into your heart. It's going to happen if you're saved. But he's not going to just allow us to continue to take all this garbage with us. He was going to continue to purge us and purify us, just as he was continuing to purge and purify them. But it's not because of their goodness. It's not because they're somehow wonderful people. It's because he made a promise to them, and his name is on the line. His reputation is on the line, right? And that's the reason why he's going to chastise them. He's going to correct them because he's put his seal on them. He's made it known when they came out of Egypt under Moses and the miracles and all of the thing. Let my people go, right? The whole thing, it was known Yahweh is acting here. God's name is now on the line to do something with these people. It's the same for us. You can have an assurance that God will continue to act in your life to bring you closer to himself, the easy way or the hard way. He will continue to do that because his name's on the line. His reputation is at stake. So God doesn't want the heathen to be able to make fun of him and scoff like, oh, you brought him out of Egypt, but then you had to kill them all. God will not allow that to happen. And that's the idea here. In fact, we're going to see that repetition again now, because now in verse 10, we're going to read a large section, verse 10 through 17. And we see how this pattern continues to repeat itself now. So in verse 10, it says, so I took them out of the land of Egypt and I brought them into the wilderness. I gave them my statutes and I made them to know my judgments, which if a man does them, he will live. He's talking about the law of Moses. And that's absolutely true. If you could keep the whole law, you would have eternal life. In verse 12, but let me just add to that, no one can, right? Verse 12, and I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies them. Can I just give you a little extra credit? This won't be on the test later. But in verse 12, notice please in all of your Old Testament, every time the Lord refers to the Sabbath day, what's he say? My Sabbaths. Do you know, in fact, the Sabbath day, it says in Deuteronomy and some other places, that the Sabbath day is a sign between God and Israel. Some things in the law predated the law, and they're even after the law, like tithing is a good example of that, right? We see tithing in the days of Abraham and Melchizedek. And then tithing is also incorporated into the law, and it's also used by Jesus, still for today. But there are some things like the Sabbath it was given specifically to Israel as a covenant between God and Israel, but he always calls it, this is just extra credit, like in verse 12, he always calls it my Sabbath. Why does he do that? Because God created in 6 literal days, and then he took the Sabbath. It was his Sabbath. What we do and what Israel did, that was just role modeling. That was shadowing what God did in reality. He worked for 6 days and then he rested on the 7th day. And so it's his Sabbath that he gave to Israel and said, you can role model what I did in creation and show the rest of the world. So every time they did a Sabbath, they were presenting to the world what he did in creation. He was talking of creation the whole time. He always calls it my Sabbath. That's just extra credit. But anyway, let's continue here because God's making the point that as they came into the wilderness, he gave them his law. That's the big point he's making. And I just can pick up in verse 12. I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes, and they rejected my judgments, which if a man does them, he will live by them. And my Sabbaths they greatly profaned. Then I said I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to completely destroy them. But, in verse 14, I acted for the sake of my name, that I should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, before whose sight I had brought them out. In verse 15, also I swore to them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all the lands. Why? Because they rejected my judgments and my statutes, and they did not walk in them. They even profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart continually walked after their idols. And then finally, verse 17, yet my eye had pity on them rather than bringing them to ruin, and I did not make of them a complete destruction in the wilderness. So number one, God calls them and makes them a nation, and yet they don't give up their idols. And now here in verse 10 through 17, here's the second piece of evidence. God says, I gave you all the tools you needed, he says, to become like him. He gave them his entire law. He gave them the perfect law, the law by which if you could do it, you'd be perfect. You'd become like God. But no man can keep the whole law. But what a blessing that he said, here is the way to exact right. Have you heard these stories? And I don't remember the exact numbers, but the idea that, Chuck Smith used to always tell the story that if you take off in LA in a plane and you're headed to Maui, and that pilot is just off by 1 degree, you are not going to hit the island at all. You're not going to be anywhere near Hawaii when you get there. If that plane is just off by 1 degree. And so you see just how important it is to be right on, dead center. And God's law it's this perfect way. It's God's beacon saying this is true north. This is the perfect direction. If you just do this, everything will go right. And yet not a man, not a woman, not one of us can keep it and can do it perfectly. But have you ever thought about the law in that respect? That it's God saying, this is what it is to be like me. Here, take it. Come this direction. Isn't that cool? What a blessing that God's saying, I want you to be close to me. I want you to be like me. I want you to enjoy good things. That's the idea of the law. It's not some burden. It's God saying, I want to show you what right looks like. We use that expression all the time in the military, right? What right looks like. The law of God is what right looks like. What an insult that they didn't want it. That so many of them didn't even try to follow it. Wow, what a shame. So with Israel here still pictured as still rebellious, God again decides to show them grace in judging them and in bringing them into the land. So instead of utterly wiping them out and destroying them, he judges them, he corrects them. And whom God loves, he chastens, right? We see that in the scriptures. And why'd he do it? Because they were worthy? Because we're worthy? No, he did it for his namesake. That means because he made a promise and he won't go back. He won't go back on his promise. You can guarantee it. I know it's a little cheesy, but I love that scene in Lord of the Rings. I don't know, one of them, maybe it's the second one, where Frodo's trying to get away from Sam because he's afraid Sam's going to get hurt if Sam goes with him. And so Frodo's just trying to leave and get ahead of, but Sam made a commitment to stay with Frodo the whole way on the whole trip. And so Frodo's leaving on the boat and Sam's coming after him, but Sam can't swim. And Sam's coming after him anyway, and he starts to drown because he's not willing to let Frodo leave. And then and finally Frodo comes back and helps him get in the boat. And it's like, what are you doing? And Sam says, I made a promise and I intend to keep it. And that's just a cheesy movie showing how somebody can make a commitment and want to keep it. Think of God's commitment. That's God's commitment to you. If you've accepted the cross, if you've seen the blood covering your life and the Spirit filling you, that's the commitment God's made to you. I will not quit on you, he says. And how many times did he have that he could have destroyed Israel? And he didn't. He didn't, because he will not give up on them. Let's go to verse 18. Verse 18, I said to their children, now here we are into a whole nother generation. I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, and do not keep their judgments, and do not defile yourselves with their idols. I am Yahweh, your God. Walk in my statutes and keep my judgments and do them. In verse 20, keep my Sabbaths holy, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am Yahweh, your God. So now we see this grace of God being given to yet another generation, the generation that is in the wilderness. And he's giving them a chance to choose him and to follow him. He came to every generation, giving them this opportunity. But then we see in verse 21, what do you think is going to happen? Verse 21, but I turned back my hand and I acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations in whose sight I had brought them out. Also, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them among the lands, because they had not done my statutes, but they had rejected my statutes and had profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were going after the idols of their fathers. This is wordy now. We're getting wordy because we're intentionally repeating the same thing over and over. So now even this second generation, all those that came out of Egypt, they've already died and gone on, except for Moses and Caleb, Joshua, and that's about it. And now this is a second generation. God gives them the same opportunity. Follow my word. It will lead you to me. It will make you like me. And yet they're in the same rebellion. And now we go to verse 25. And I also gave them, it's the same idea as he gave them up. He gave them up statutes that were not good and judgments by which they could not live. It's the idea that once they chose not to follow his statutes and his law, he gave them up to doing whatever they wanted to do. In verse 26, and I pronounced them unclean because of their gifts, and that they caused all their firstborn to pass through the fire, so that it might make them desolate, in order that they might know that I am Yahweh. Wow. So after we reject God long enough, God says, all right, I'll give you up to do what you want to do then. And it gets so bad that they're even committing child sacrifice. That, you know this, right? In verse 26, this is the idea of your children passing through the fire. That was the offering of Moloch. They'd heat up the statue arms of Moloch, and they'd set the newborns on there. And that was their form of abortion. And we are no more humane today than they were then. And so there comes a time in someone's rebellion that God just backs off and says, all right, have it your way. And that's a desperate moment. Don't you think of Samson? There's that verse, and it's probably the most tragic verse in the entire Bible when you read about Samson, and it says how Samson rose up to go out and serve the Lord just like he always did in the past, but he knew not that the Holy Spirit had left him. He stayed in rebellion so long, that he was far from the Lord and didn't even know it. And that's the same situation that we're seeing here. God just backs off, and they don't even realize it. They don't even care at first. So giving into these lusts, this is the same as idolatry here. In the sense, by the way, think of it this way. Sometimes we downplay our idols and we say, well, I'm not serving idols. I just have this pursuit in my life, or I just have that pursuit in my life. If it's the master passion of your life, that's your God. That's the easiest way to describe your actual God. Whatever your master passion is, that is your God. There's only two things in this entire existence that you can worship. There's only two. You can either make God, the creator, your master passion, or you can make something of the creation your master passion. That's it. It's the only options. You're either an idol worshiper, having some creation your master passion, or you're worshiping the one true God, the creator. That's it. That's the only options we have. Any other pursuit that is our master passion is idolatry, and it's cheating on God. So when we lust for the created, that is idolatry. And that's endless, by the way. There is no satisfying of the lust for earthly things. It doesn't ever come to an end. Read Romans chapter 1 if you want some homework on that. But let's press on. Verse 27. Therefore, Son of man, speak to the house of Israel and say to them, thus saith Lord Yahweh, yet in this your fathers have blasphemed me by acting what? Rebelliously or unfaithfully against me. Actually, it comes from the same root word right there at the end of verse 27. He says that they've acted unfaithfully. It's the same as rebellion. Wow. Verse 28, indeed, I brought them into the land which I swore to give them, and they saw every high hill, and they saw every leafy tree, and they offered their sacrifices, and there they gave the provocation of their offering. There also they made their soothing aromas, and there they poured out their drink offerings. So even when they stopped wandering in the wilderness, and God brought them into the promised land, who gave it to them? Did these idols give it to them? This land to be envied of all lands? God gave it to them. And even when they get in and they take possession of this blessing from God, they still continue in their lustful worship of the creation. Wow. I mean, somebody might say, well, I don't know if God's really going to bring us into the promised land. That's why my heart's wandering. But how about this? How about when they actually see the fulfillment of God's blessing and they still lust after other things instead of serving God? I dare say that still happens today. Many of us have seen God work. We've seen God do great things. We've seen people get saved. We've seen other miracles happen. And yet we still are, as the song says, prone to wander. Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love, right? Verse 29. Then I said to them, what is the high place to which you are going? So its name is called Bama to this day. Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus saith Lord Yahweh, will you defile yourselves in the way of your fathers and play the harlot after their detestable things? And when you offer your gifts, when you cause your sons to pass through the fire, you are defiling yourself with all your idols to this day. And shall I be inquired by you, O house of Israel, as I live? As I live, declares Yahweh, Lord Yahweh, I will not be inquired of by you. In verse 32, and what comes upon your spirit will not happen when you say, we will be like the nations, like the families of the lands, to minister to wood and to stone. We're going to endure, is what they're saying. So he goes back and he's talking about these high places, all of these places of heathen worship on the tops of the mountains. In fact, the tops of the mountains became so well known for their idolatry that the word high place, which is translated here Bama in some translations in verse 29, the word high place became the definition of a place of idol worship, because they used every one of them to worship false gods. And so you no longer had to say, well, they went to worship their idols. You just say they went to the high place, and you know exactly what they were doing. So all these reasons God gives to them, and these are the reasons why he will not listen to their petition in coming to Ezekiel. So he goes, he's saying generation after generation after generation, I've simply asked you to be faithful to me. What was Joshua's big command? Choose you this day whom you will serve.
You've been listening to Believing the Word, a ministry of author and pastor Dan Shunk at Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Pastor Dan has been teaching through a series in the book of Ezekiel. We'd love to get connected with you and hear about how God is working in your life through this teaching program. You can reach us by phone at 717-500-1102. Again, that number is 717-500-1102. You can also check us out at our website at ccchambersburg.org, where you can learn more about the ministry of Calvary Chapel Chambersburg and find our chapter-by-chapter messages. If you're in the Chambersburg area, we'd love to have you join us Sunday mornings and Thursday evenings on 5121 Coffee Avenue. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with more from the book of Ezekiel. But until then, this has been Believing the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk.